Just this month, the Texas State Board of Education officially approved its new required reading list for millions of public school students. And with a 9-5 passing vote, this included a lot of religious material. Now, the religious material is all from the Bible, both Old and New Testament, and some Christian-themed literature. There is nothing from the Quran. There is nothing from the Buddhist sutras or the Hindu Vedas or any other religion. So this isn't some comparative religion class, but it's also not worship or devotional based. It is snuck in as literature, probably to get around a lot of the First Amendment issues that seem to get in the way with this kind of thing. And so that's what I want to do today. Let's look at the required reading that comes from the Bible, at least some parts of it, and let's address it as literature, which means reading it in context, looking at it comparatively, seeing if there's contradictions, trying to understand what morals might be coming out of this. This video is not going to be me talking about the politics or policies behind this. I covered that, I think it was a couple years ago when Louisiana was trying to pass the 10 Commandments. You can see that video here, and I get into some of those arguments. But here, I want to show you what is on this list and go through it and some of the problems that I see with it. Yes, this is sneaky from Texas, and it is obvious what they are doing, but it's not surprising. I just wonder how far they've thought about this. Similar to when people want to put the 10 Commandments in schools and they can't even list the 10 Commandments, or they're straight up breaking them by having school board meetings on the Sabbath, etc. Like, the hypocrisy and ignorance is always astounding in this. So let's dive into the required reading. The first section that I saw was called Jonah and the Whale. Now, stick with me for a second. This might sound pedantic, but I think it's pretty indicative of a problem that we're going to see consistently, which is when you have to soften and reframe things for children. Now, hear me out. I am all for introducing literature to children in an age-appropriate way. If we were talking to the kids about ancient Greek stories and the Odyssey, there are certain parts I would leave out or reframe too. But I'm not claiming that the Odyssey is the literal word of God that is useful for teaching, rebuking, and correcting and training in righteousness, which is what a large part of the population who is going to be required to read this believes, or is the pretense behind. And if you say, well, that's not how the school is teaching it, they kind of are when it's the only religious reading that they've included. They set themselves up for the scrutiny, not me. So my point with the title of Jonah and the Whale is that that's not what the Bible calls it. It's called a great fish. Again, I know that sounds small, but already they have to make it easier for kids, and they have to change what is clearly written in the book. And if they're going to do it with something that small, imagine how they're going to do it when it applies to the moral lesson behind the story of Jonah and the whale. Let's give the two versions. What do we think is going to be taught here? Probably the same thing that is going to be taught in Sunday schools. You have a character of Jonah who is asked by God to go on a great mission, who fears that mission and runs from God, and God pursues him, and in that pursuing, he is captured by a great fish where God saves him. God rescues Jonah, is how that is typically shown to children. And then Jonah gets to go on and do this great mission where he saves a ton of people for the kingdom of heaven. This is the Christianized, moralized version, not just for children, but that is taught in general. But this is supposed to be a literature class. And if you actually read that story, there's a whole lot of darker themes and consequences going on. I wonder if they will look at the concept of free will. Jonah is a prophet who wants to do something other than what God wants him to do. And does God allow him that free will that supposedly we have? Or does he not only threaten his life, but the life of everyone around him, like on the ship, until God gets his way? That's a strange moral universe for a first grader. Do what God tells you to, or else. He's willing to kill you or others. Even Jonah recognizes this. He says, "Throw me overboard. God is angry with me, not with you. Don't let yourself become collateral damage, because that's what this God is willing to do, apparently. And the assigned excerpt seems to stop before, I think, the really interesting and, again, more problematic part of the story. Jonah is saved by God. The fish vomits him up, or the whale vomits him up on shore. Glory be to God. See how everything works out when you just keep yourself safe in the will of God. But the ending of that story, where God actually, for kind of once, shows mercy to Nineveh. Only again because they did what he wanted them to do. Otherwise, he was ready to what? Utterly destroy them. But the ending is that Jonah is pissed about this. It's a story about a prophet who hates mercy. He never wanted to do this. He doesn't want these people to be saved. He did it with a gun to his head, and he's not happy about it. The only actual understanding of this God, if we were doing a character analysis by way of literature, is that he is a God who will do whatever he wants to the guilty or the innocent until he is worshipped and obeyed, and that his goodness or his mercy is only for those that do and think the right thing. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a wonderful lesson to be had there, but it's not about how good this God is. It's about tyranny. But there's a lot of sections I want to touch on briefly, so I'm not going to take too long on any one of these. The next one is the story of David and Goliath, adapted from the Children's Book of Heroes. And this is obvious. Of course, this is on the list. What an exciting story for first graders. With the help of God, there is no task you can't accomplish. It's the perfect American story, the brave underdog. It's about courage and faith and believing in yourself. Of course, the story ends with David knocking down Goliath. We won't talk about when he cuts off the head and brings it back to Jerusalem, not that battlefield mutilation that David is going to become so well known for, like when he cuts off 200 foreskins. See this video here. But again, let's view this through the lens of literature. And I am making some assumptions here. I haven't seen the curriculum, but if I were a betting man, I am very confident in how this story is going to be positioned. And also, do you think at any point these educators are going to be encouraged to say, now, remember, this is fiction, just like the Hungry Caterpillar? Or will they be talking about this as if it was a historical event, as if this God is real? As soon as that happens, this whole cover of literature is out the window. Even if there's some more progressive ones that kind of sneak through the system and teach it as some kind of allegory or metaphor, what is it for? Because biblically, the point is not about the great things you can do if you just trust God. From a literature perspective, it's national war literature. It's propaganda. And if you were really doing a good literature study, you would look at all of the contradictions, of which there are so many about this story. See this video if you'd like to see more on that. And sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, so I'm having some coughing fits, so my face might be fluctuating in redness depending on how the editing goes. But those contradictions are not no big deal. It's the perfect thing to point out in literature because it shows how stories evolve over time, how you have competing traditions, like how in 1 Samuel, it's David, but in 2 Samuel, it's Elhanan who kills Goliath. And then in 1 Chronicles, you have a fixing of this, a smoothing it out, saying, oh, it was the brother of Goliath. That's a really interesting evolution of a story that we see over different periods of time from different authors. Again, those competing traditions and the reconciling of them. But that points to the man-made nature of the thing. If this is still supposed to be under the religious idea that this is true, and the one version being presented to kids is the true version that happened historically, and we can rely on it because it's from the Bible, you're going to lose all of that. So again, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident which version is going to be taught. The next segment is Daniel in the Lion's Den from the CBN Children's adaptation. Tell me which version you think will be taught. And we know, because we know which one it's going to be based off of, this is going to be a story about courage. They might even try to talk about how it's about religious freedom. Daniel is in a strange world, a different land that thinks differently and worships a different God than him. And against the rules, he stands up for what he believes is right. What do you think this administration will do if a Muslim student stands up against this required reading and says, no, I want to read from my Quran? Right there, you can know that they don't at all want to pass this off as a story about religious freedom or courage. What a joke. What utter hypocrisy. And it's so obvious. Here's something that a lot of people don't really think about with that story. Yes, Daniel is saved from the lion's den. Yay, no one got eaten by lions. Well, not quite. Here's the part that's not in the CBN adaptation. The king commands that the men who accused Daniel take his place and that they are thrown into the lion's den. That's not terrible. That was the punishment, and those men are guilty. You know who else is thrown in? The women and children. Do we hear Daniel protest against this? No, that's the victory in the story. That's the guilty getting their comeuppance. I know it's not an order being given by God, but the framing of Daniel is saved, oh, it's so good, without talking about the sad reality of the innocent women and children that took his place while he did not protest. That's going to get pretty ugly pretty fast. Again, not that it would be covered. This, for some reason, gets held till 3rd grade, by the way. Oh, yay, they're a little bit older. But which moral lesson will be taught here? Be brave, pray no matter what, respect other people's religions. God is faithful to his loyal, obedient servants, but not to the innocent family members of the enemies. Cool. In grade 4, we get Luke 14. It's a really short passage. You can go and read it for yourself. Jesus sees people at a banquet choosing places of honor and tells them not to take the best seat so that the host can come and move them up, giving the famous line that everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles themselves will be exalted. Finally, a great moral lesson for children. Be humble. I remember this actually bugging me when it was presented to me, even while I was still a believer, in this fashion, because Jesus isn't saying take the lowest position. He's giving a strategic way to ensure an actual better position, because position matters, hierarchy matters. Don't take the high seat. You might be embarrassed if you get moved down. Take the low seat so that you can be publicly honored and moved up. Even so many atheists talk about Jesus' great moral lessons and how it's about humility and the least of these and things like this, only to a point and only to get something better. The meek will inherit the earth. Not the meek won't inherit anything, but be meek anyways. Be meek so that you get more later. Delayed gratification is like half of Jesus' message. Don't store up treasures for yourself here on earth isn't about living a simple life so that you can actually take care of others. It's about so that you can be rewarded where your treasures will stay and be more bountiful in heaven. This whole religion is based around a carrot and a stick. The idea that it's some beautiful message of humility is an utter joke. It's humble bragging. And when you look at all the people who are supposedly Christian and in power, I'm not going to believe for a second that their agenda is the teaching of humility. Moving on to what we learn about in grade 5. And by the way, I saw some different lists. Take all of this with a slight caveat. I'm not sure which source to trust the most, but I think that this is the list, or at least pretty close, and the ages of when it might be introduced might be slightly off here, but I'm doing the best I can with the information I could find. So in grade 5, we get to Moses and the burning bush and the Red Sea. And you know what? This is a pretty easy one for the state to defend. After all, this is about liberation and freedom. The Exodus story has absolutely influenced literature, politics, civil rights. Like, you could teach this in a very worthwhile and secular way. Will that be done? I highly doubt it. And I want you to hear me on that loud and clear. I am not against the reading of the Bible. I am not against the Bible as literature. I'm also not dumb enough to think that that's all it's going to be framed as. Again, especially since there are no other comparative religious texts to go alongside it. When they remedy that, we can have a more nuanced conversation. But generally speaking, there are great things to learn from the Bible. There are really neat parts of the Bible. There are historical realities in some parts of the Bible. The Exodus is not one of them. And there's a wide range of different literary genres that are fascinating. No more fascinating than you get in any other religion, by the way. More culturally available, sure. And for that reason, and since it's played such a part in the Western canon, you could build off it more to our current culture than you could from the Vedas. I get that. So this isn't just grumpy atheists not wanting kids to hear about the Bible. Just learn about it correctly, or the way you say you're presenting it as literature. But you know what a big part of literature is? Fiction, and distinguishing between nonfiction and fiction. So it's Exodus 3 and Exodus 14. You know what's part of Exodus 14? The hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And I know all the arguments. See this video. But again, are we going to be talking about the tyrant of God? Are we going to be talking about Moses' conversation with God, where God tells Moses exactly why he's doing the plagues and how he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that he can display his power so that all of Egypt will know him, even though that fails? We're going to talk about all of the innocent Egyptians that die so that God could have this cool moment of power and glory. Are we going to frame it as God hating slavery and freeing people without covering the next book, where God gives specific instructions to the same people he just freed on how they can go buy slaves? Of course not. Teach the Bible. Do it all you want. Do it accurately. Do it consistently. But this will be cherry-picked to high heaven. And what struck me as I was thinking about putting together this episode is no matter what I cover it or how well I do it, how much context I give, how much comparison, how much nuance, how much fairness, there are always Christians that tell me, I didn't do it well. I didn't go far enough. I didn't read 14 verses later where it says this and that supposedly destroys the whole thing, which it never does, by the way. But how many of them will write letters into the Texas State School Board about, hey, you're only showing a pretty one-sided nature of Yahweh here. Him as the liberator. What about him as the enslaver? It won't happen. Not a single instance of that will happen from a believer. So much hypocrisy from the supposed religion of truth. But let's go on to the next grade where we get into Matthew 6. Those famous words from Jesus, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. Look at the birds. Look at the lilies. Does not God take care of them? No. I've covered this before too. I can't remember in which video, but I went through the stats about how many birds we know of die from starvation. And also birds do worry about the future. They build nests for their shelter. They collect excesses of food so that they don't go hungry. God isn't doing anything. And since I started this sentence, 4 children just died of starvation. This is a horrendous thing to teach. And it's also a cruel thing to teach, because many of these public school students, which have had food quite literally taken away from them because of this Christian administration that is so eager to get them to read this verse, will be hungry, will be anxious. And no verse or magical idea that God's got you is going to actually fix that. So if this were actually being taught honestly, students should be able to question it. They should be able to say, wait, is this Jesus giving practical advice? Is this poetic, or is it an unrealistic command? And also, just zooming out, look at Matthew 6 in general. This is like anti-materialist to its nth degree. Right before this is that verse that I covered earlier where Jesus says, do not store up treasures for yourself here on earth. The one cannot serve both God and money, as we supposedly have a billionaire Christian president that this state, again, not everybody, voted for. What is the point of teaching these things? Again, it'd be great if it was just as literature, but it's not. It's clearly not going to be. Enough with this one. Let's move on. In the next grade, they teach the 23rd Psalm. And some of these specifically, they have talked about which translation they will use. For this, they will use KJV. I can't wait for the infighting of the parents who, when their 7th grader comes home and is telling them about the King James version that they have to memorize or read or whatever, get pissed off. Oh, one thing I wanted to note. Insofar as what I read, my understanding is that some can actually opt out for religious reading, but that it will still be part of the test and their grades. That's not how opting out works. It's like it sounds good, and then they're going to immediately punish those who would do so. This doesn't come out for a few years. We have to see how it actually plays out, but in what I read and my comprehension of it, that sounds pretty messed up. Some parts of this are really actually truly beautiful, and some are not. Like how the Lord will prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. It's really a big passage about submission. If you want to see everything wrong with the idea of the good shepherd, see this video here. And I'll have all these videos linked. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to keep moving here, but there's so much wrong with these otherwise considered like beautiful or child-friendly passages that even if you do soften it and reframe it, if you're not actually addressing it, and if you're letting these kids believe in any way that this is from their creator and that that creator is good and loving, etc., you're doing a true disservice and actually causing harm by introducing these concepts and these ideas. And I know that Christians can't see it like that. But the idea that we are sheep to this shepherd is not a beautiful thing at all. Also in grade 7, we get to the Beatitudes, also in the KJV version. Who could object to blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers? But like we've already talked about, I don't find this beautiful at all. It's telling people to enjoy their suffering because they will be rewarded for it at a time and in a place that doesn't exist. It keeps people down. It's been used for control. And to children, then it is indoctrination. And I honestly believe that's what a big part of this is. I don't think you have to be some crazy conspiracy theorist or some, the Christian nationalists are going to be taking over and they're already trying to get your children to fall in line. I don't think it has to be that far. Religion has always been used to control people. And I think we see a pretty recurring theme in all religions and in Christianity and in the selected text here that will continue that. It's not introducing it. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's not some evil scheme that some billionaire just thought up. It is how this stuff has always gone, and it's never been good. I'm not going to act like it is now, though. Suffering shouldn't just be accepted. It's not a beautiful thing. It doesn't make you more holy. It's something that we should try to alleviate. But when Christians keep making it something noble, they can excuse their inaction. Now we're going to start getting into some of the what would already be obvious issues. Saving it for the 8th graders, we get into Ecclesiastes, specifically Ecclesiastes 3. To everything there is a season. What are some of those seasons? A time to kill, a time to hate, a time for war. Now, again, from a literature perspective, we could talk about how interesting this is and the poetic nature of understanding the comings and goings of life, a time to born, time to die, and everything in between. But appointed from a God, it makes it sound like no matter what happens to you or what you're asked to do or what you've done, it's all part of God's grand design, his plan. So again, take it. Please teach the parts of Ecclesiastes where the author, who is supposedly the wisest man that has ever lived and will ever live, its wisdom was granted to him straight from God himself, questions whether humans are really so different than animals. Humans die, animals die, we all go to the same place. This author did not believe in heaven and hell. He says, who knows whether the human spirit rises upward? That's not that Sunday school certainty about heaven. It's skeptical wisdom literature. Are you going to teach it like that in your literature class? I will be so curious to find out. Next, they get into Lamentations 3, trauma literature. This could be taught in a really interesting way, and I think it's at a decently appropriate age level. I think we're still at grade 8 for this. Jerusalem has been destroyed. The city is devastated. The people are grieving. What does this look like in a historical context? What happened in the ancient times when a city was completely taken over? What does that look like on a personal level? I feel like you could teach and talk about this in a way that you teach about the horrors of World War II or something of the sort. But are they going to talk about the obvious sovereignty of God? And there's Christian framing about, this is, an honest reaction when people don't understand what's happening to them, and sometimes they get angry with God and question God, and that's an okay place to be sometimes. And then they completely reframe it. But God is still good. Is he? Are you going to question this main protagonist of our literature here when we see the destruction that he has allowed and or caused and or commanded for his chosen people because of their disobedience, which again just goes back to this entire theme, obey God or else, right where it started in Jonah. In context, this story, this grieving, this horrendous thing wasn't just something that happened. It's something that God ordained. I wonder how they'll teach that. Then we move on to high school, where we talk about the prodigal son. And I'm not going to cover that right now because I have a whole episode planned. I had meant to do it for Father's Day, but I didn't get that video put together. And gosh, I hope I'm wrong. prove me wrong. What if this was a really cool, open and honest discussion from a literature basis about what do we think about these stories, and is this fair, and what moral lessons can be gleaned from this, and who can think of how this relates to other literature that we're looking at this semester, etc. Again, it already can't be this because you left out the other religions, but still it could be good or better if you have to have it. And if 2030 rolls around and we see that this is being taught in this brilliant, open, secular, honest way for public schools, I will come back and say what an idiot I was now. But I'm not going to be wrong. Where I really wish I could be a fly on the wall is when they cover the book of Job. I laid out a while ago everything I ever thought about Job and how Christians falsely, obviously, dishonestly discuss this book. This book, by far, is the clearest example that we do not have free will, that we do not serve a good God, and that everything that has ever happened that is bad, all the suffering, all the evil, is 100% Him. So yeah, I want to see how they cover this. How will they cover when God gives express permission to the accuser to kill Job's children? Will they do the same old Christian song and dance, but it's cool because God gave him more? One of the most disgusting things I've ever heard in all of Christian apologetics. Children are replaceable. God wants to kill them to prove a point. That's his prerogative. If that's the God you worship, you can keep him. Now, Job as literature is incredible. The poetry, the storytelling, the juxtaposition, it's incredible. Really, maybe one of the best books, if we're talking just from a literature sense, in the Bible. But my guess is it will be positioned as an answer to suffering, which makes no sense whatsoever. Like, Job is actually the Bible admitting that the easy answers are garbage, and then still not providing a better one. Like, it's almost hilarious. I said in my biblical review of it, it's like it was written by an atheist who snuck it in there, and believers were just too dense to understand what it's really saying. Then it goes back to Adam and Eve. How do you teach this in a public school at the high school level under the guise of literature? Do we think Texas is going to teach it as an allegory? Like, I get it from a Western canon perspective, the creation story of the prominent religion, the fall from grace, the first sin, temptation, like I get it. In fact, right alongside Adam and Eve is taught the Divine Comedy. Even when they go outside the Bible, they still keep it Christian, which is really going to confuse because so many Christians have so many ideas what they think Christianity is, and it's just stuff from Paradise Lost or the Divine Comedy. So that's really going to mess things up. But seriously, how do you teach this in a state where more people believe in young earth creationism, where people believe the story of Adam and Eve is literal, where they don't believe in evolution? How do you do it justice for the literature that it is and how it has contributed to literature? Gosh, I can't wait to get my hands on the curriculum. And the last one, and I know I'm kind of just wrapping things up fast here, is 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Let's believe what the Bible says about love, and then let's compare it to the God who is supposedly love itself. It does not go very well. The funny thing is, again, if we're actually looking at this as literature and we consider the context and who Paul is writing to, what church and why, it's a rebuke. It's to a divided church who is arguing about status and spiritual gifts. It's not romantic poetry. It was never meant to be read at weddings. And for a verse that says love keeps no record of wrong in the same collected canon, where again God is described as love, how do you square, eternal punishment? This is actually one of the chapters in the Bible that disproves God the most if you just believe what it says. Will they do a comparative analysis on that? I don't think so, but I did. So that is the strange irony of the Christian required reading list for public school students in Texas. The framing around this has been that it will act as a moral anchor for these children, these developing minds. It could, if it were taught correctly. It's propaganda being handed to students under the guise of literature. Again, there's so much more to be said on the legality of it and the fairness of it, how it will affect students of different beliefs, how it will affect even the Christian community, which translations, what's being read, if certain parents will still think that the stories are not right for their kids. Of course, there are non-believers at these schools. There's a ton that could be diagnosed here and discussed. But let me know your thoughts. I'll hope to see you Tuesday with a new reaction video. Again, give me some grace. There's so much going on with our move right now. We're right in the middle of it. Until the next one, keep thinking. Thank you to my top tiers of support, my Iconoclast, Ann, Boris, Chris, Grace Steele, Gnarly Will, Grant, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kiboga, Matthew, Perry, and Sean, my Humanist Heroes, Chris, Craig, James, Jared, Christy, my Atheist Advocates, Aquitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeremy, Jugs, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Rega, Sparky, and Thomas, as well as all of my Secular Scholar patrons. If you enjoy Mindshift, would you consider joining these fine people? Thanks, and have a great day.